and he just freezes and stops and falls over.
Wow.
They took him to, the brother's streaming on YouTube now, so I ain't gonna say what. It goes back to the Mark of Zorro, brother, right? It goes back to that again. But on the way to the hospital, the dude had 5 heart attacks.
Wow.
Hey, brother, and he was a young man, but they got him. They have him on one of his social medias. I don't know if it was Twitter, whatever it was, but they have him in a little tank top, little weenie man body. One of them Edomite looking Brazilians. He wasn't no brother. Well, he could have been. You know how we all mixed up and shit. We don't know. The point is, he looked like a little weenie man and showing his arm. I got the Mark of Zorro. And then the next time he's on the air, doing his broadcast, he's talking, and literally, if there was ever something like a comedy, he stops and just leans over like a tree, just falls back. Pow! I'm like, man. So it's going down. So here we are in verse 25. Do me a favor and read Daniel. This is a quick rehash. We're going to move forward, but we'll just rehash Daniel chapter 9 and verse 25. Go ahead, Adi. Daniel chapter 9 and verse 25.
Daniel chapter 9. The page starts. Daniel chapter 9 and verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem
Stop right there. From the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem. That commandment, you guys, went forth once again under the reign in the first year of Cyrus the Great, right? The king of Persia, emperor of all of the kingdoms that he had. And it says, continue on the exercise after the going forth.
After the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times.
So you see that in Ezra chapter 6, verses 14 and 15, that culminated. In other words, the street got built. But when it says unto the Messiah, the Prince, that's talking about, so let's talk about in verse 24, it talked about 70 weeks. So it's letting us know the period of time between the Cyrus the Great in 538 and the coming of Christ. And the coming of Christ, which would be, we're going to call it 1 AD, right? As they like to say, year of our Lord, right? Anno Domini. So that's what that period is talking about. And that period in the spirit is what the Most High is calling 69 weeks. That's why he says, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So 60 is 60, 2, that's 62, plus the 7 mentioned beforehand is 69. The streets shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. That's Ezra's, like I said, chapter 6, verses 14 and 15 lets you know that was when the wall was built. But you still got the time until the coming of the Messiah, the Prince. I think in Nehemiah, let me see something real quick before I give it to y'all. I think in Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 15 as well, it mentions, let me get there. It mentions a completion of the city or the temple, one of the two. Let me see. Chapter. Yeah, the wall. All right. So do this real quick on the exercise. You guys write this down. This goes with Ezra. Ezra chapter 6, verse 14 and 15. Nehemiah chapter 6. And you guys, you can just put verses 1 through 15, and so you're going to just read verse 15, and you guys can read on that yourself, okay?
What chapter name?
Nehemiah. It's right after Ezra. It's in chapter 6 and verse 15.
6, okay. Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 15. Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 15.
Uh-huh.
So the wall was finished in the 25th day of the month, Elul, in 50 and 2 days.
There you go. Read verse 16.
Verse 16. And it came to pass that when all our enemies heard thereof, and all the heathen that were about us saw these things, they were much cast down in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was wrought of our power.
There you go. So they knew they listen, and that's how it is today. All of our enemies hate to see things that are done among us, like the building of these schools, the teaching of the Bible, because they know this isn't of man. They know that the circumstance, that our experience, our punishment, our slavery left us, nobody could come back and, for instance, and break down the scriptures and prove these points like the Most High have taught and trained us to do. So they hated that. But that verse, what we just read in Ezra and Nehemiah, is what it means in the last line, or the last thought, the last precept of verse 25 of Daniel. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. He's talking about in the midst of all of our enemies, right? Okay, so now we're going to go and deal with verse 26. Like I said, we're not trying to follow what we perceive as chronology. We're going to go and point out everything that the verse says, okay? We're going to go to the events mentioned. Go ahead, Amayetazar. Verse 26.
Verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. And the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined.
So let's go follow the events mentioned. And after 62 weeks, so they're saying 62 is 62, right? We got 70 weeks altogether. From the period now, so what are we finding out? From the period now, from the going out of the commandment to rebuild, now we're going to deal with up until the death of Yahweh Shai. That's representative of 62 of those 70 weeks. All right, which means what? There's 7 weeks left, but let's just finish this. Now, where can we find that? We know that's talking about Christ. So let's just get something. Go to St. John, the book of St. John, chapter 11. And you're going to read verses 47 through 53. Now, why? Because it tells us in this first thought in verse 26, and after 62 weeks don't worry about the time period. Focus on what? On the event. So shall the Messiah be cut off. We know that's talking about the crucifixion of Christ. But here's the most important thing. But not for himself. That's where that thought ends. The following thought is something different, and we'll get to that once we clear this up. So we go to John chapter 11 and start off on the Yetazah. You're going to read to verse 53, but start off at verse 47.
John chapter 11 and verse 47.
Now, before you read, what's taking place here, y'all? Just a few verses before, Yahweh Shai has just raised up Lazarus from the dead. And as far as the Pharisees and Sadducees and all of those that were in control, that ran the government, were concerned, that was the last straw. Listen to what they say. Go ahead, Amiyah, it's verse 47.
John chapter 11, verse 47. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him. And the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation.
Now, don't sleep on that verse, because that verse where it said, where they're afraid in verse 48, right? If we let him thus alone, that means if we don't step in and do something, the Romans are going to come and take us. Everybody's going to follow this dude. And so we will have lost control. The because the Romans here represent the prince of the people that shall come back in Daniel chapter 9 and verse 25. Remember, that's the power, that's the colonial imperial power that ran Jerusalem at the time of the Messiah, was the Romans. All right, just so that you know, we're gonna go back to that, but since we're here, I want to call that to your attention. When you read Daniel chapter 9 and verse 25, after it talks about the Messiah being cut off, but not for himself, it says, and the prince of the people that shall come, we're going to go and prove that that's talking about them. But already here, it's showing you they were the ones who were the threat to Israel. They were the ones who were, let's say this, they were the military occupation, and anything that disturbed the order that the Romans wanted, the Pharisees and the Sadducees saw as a great threat. All right. Okay, I'm gonna get to read verse 48 again.
Verse 48 of John chapter 11. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation.
Go ahead.
And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, you know nothing at all.
So he's like, you guys don't know anything. This is the high priest speaking. You're going to see they were aware of who Yahushua was, at least this one was, and what had to be done. Go ahead.
Verse 50. Nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not.
Yeah, it's profitable. It's beneficial to us that this one man die so that all of the nation don't perish. Go ahead.
Verse 51. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yahushua should die for that nation.
Go ahead.
And not for that nation alone, but that also he should gather together in one the children of the Most High that were scattered abroad.
That's talking about all of those that had come to the Americas already, all of those that were scattered throughout all of the old world kingdoms of Europe, the old world kingdoms of Asia, the old world kingdoms of Africa. Christ had to die for us all. Last verse, verse 50. And so that's what it means when it says, shall the prince Messiah be cut off and die, but not for himself. He died for the nation. All right. That's right. Keep going back and forth so you can see it. Verse 25. Verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. So this is the confirmation, right? That they knew this dude had to die so that the whole nation don't perish. Read verse 52 again.
Verse 52 of John chapter 11. And not for that nation only.
When he says not for that nation only, he's saying not for these people that are here in Jerusalem. Go ahead.
But that also he should gather together in one the children of the Most High that were scattered abroad.
Go ahead.
Then from that day forth, they took counsel together for to put him to death.
So there you go. All right. That's that part. Let's go back to chapter 26. Daniel chapter 26. Read the verse again, Amayetazah, and I'll only read it down to the end of the second thought, the thought that follows the Messiah being cut off, but not the full thing. Go ahead.
Okay. Verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city.
There
and
you
the
go, right there. And the people of the prince that shall come. Now we know it's the Romans, but I'm going to show you in Daniel chapter 10 that this is how Christ and the angels spoke concerning the succession of kingdoms on earth. They always refer to it as the prince of the power that would come. So go to Daniel chapter 10, and we're going to start off. Let me get it. Daniel chapter 10. Let me say this. I want you to start off at verse 10. Now, this is because we're going to end up breaking the whole chapter down. So we're not going to start off at verse 1. I'm going to go right to the point right to the verses that prove what we're trying to understand in chapter 9. So what is it that we want to understand in chapter 9? In verse 26, we want to understand that verse that said what? That said, and the prince of the power, and the prince, I'm sorry, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city. That phrase, the people of the prince that shall come, the beginning of this, believe it or not, goes all the way back to Daniel chapter 2, when the idea of a succession of the final four empires in time was going to happen. That's introduced to us in Daniel chapter 2 with the statue, with the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. Right, the statue's head was gold, the arms and the breast was of silver, the belly and the thighs was of brass, the legs was of iron, and in the feet was iron mixed with miry clay. That was talking about the succession beginning with the Babylonians, and then from the Babylonians they would be succeeded by the Persian Mede Empire. The Persian Mede Empire would be conquered and succeeded by the Greek Empire, and the Greek Empire would be conquered. Actually, they had a few battles, and then many of the other territories were simply annexed by the Romans, their cousins. That's what this is talking about. So Daniel right now is in Babylon. Remember, what did he tell us? In Daniel chapter 9 and verse 1, in the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus, Darius, the son of Xerxes, no, this is of the seed of the Medes, I'm sorry, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of Chaldea. There you go. In the first year of his reign, Daniel, understood. So in other words, Chaldea we know is Babylon. So this is who Daniel is in Babylon, attending to the deals, attending to his duties in captivity there. So he's having a dream about the succession of the various kingdoms. Also, remember, Daniel's dream in chapter 7 was what? Was a mirroring image, a mirroring, let's not image, but a mirroring theme of what was revealed in Daniel chapter 2. But this time Daniel got it instead of the king. And this time it wasn't about an image, it was about four beasts. The first one was in line with the eagle's wings. The second was a bear that had three ribs in his mouth, and one side was higher than the other one. The third one was a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings on his back. And the final one, it just mentioned that it was ferocious. It had iron teeth. It didn't say what it was, but we went to 2nd Ezra chapter 11 and found out that it was an eagle. All right, this is the same. So Daniel is picking it up from there. So I'm yet to say you're in Daniel chapter 10, and I want you to start off. Where did I go? I want you to start off, like I said, at verse 12. Now this is Yahushua came and giving Daniel this breakdown. All right, this understanding behind him having fasted 21 days. Go ahead.
Daniel chapter 10, verse 12. Then said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy power, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days.
So now, let's see. In other words, all of the angels, I should say like this, every kingdom on this planet Earth has principalities. They have angelic forces that go before them during their time. And war is waged in the spiritual realm by their principality to become the preeminent empire and then to maintain the preeminent, its position as the preeminent. Yes, Dawiyah.
So let's say the Chinese, they would have their own principalities.
Yeah.
America has their own principalities, whereas Russia will have their own principalities.
Yes.
And every country or nation has their own.
Every group of, every nation of people. I'm going to show you something. It gets intricate. Remember, real quick, just to show you that, go to Colossians chapter 1. And you got it. When you speak, you have to come a little closer, because once you get back there, the thing is broken. But I understood you. I'm just saying, to ask the next, or make a comment or ask the question from here on out, you got to get at least as close as my Walla and Elisha. Go to Colossians chapter 1. Let me get where I'm going first. But it's Colossians chapter 1. And we'll just start off, I'm going to get to verse 13, okay?
Okay, Colossians chapter 1 and verse 13.
Now, this is on the issue of the principalities. So to show you, they exist, Doc. Go ahead.
Who have delivered us from the power of darkness and have translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins, who is the image of the invisible power, the firstborn of every creature. For by him were all things created that are in heaven.
This is talking about Yahweh Shai. Yahweh Shai is the creator under the Most High. The Most High, he is the firstborn of all the creatures, meaning he is the first creation, and then the Most High appointed to him to create everything else. Go ahead.
Verse 16 from the top. For by him were all things created that were in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible.
So that means there are things that we can see, and there are creation that we cannot see. Go ahead.
Whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him.
Now, Amayetazar, look up the term principalities, because you have earthly principalities, and then you have heavenly principalities, what this verse is telling us. And the heavenly principalities and powers and thrones and dominions are what? Are invisible to our eye, but they exist. Esau know that. He be trying to paint it out in his mythology. Like they'll show you, hold up my word, I'm coming to you. Don't lose your thought, okay? Don't lose the question. They'll show you movies like Thor, and it'll have what exists in the spiritual realm according to the Norwegian mythology, Asgard. And you got Odin and Thor's daddy kicked his ass out of fucking Thor heaven, I guess, out of Asgard. Let's see this principality. Now look at number 3. The territory of a prince, or the country which give title to a prince, as the Principality of Wales. All right. Now, the person over that, so let's say, but now remember, we're reading. See, if we read this and we haven't read the scriptures, we'll think it's only talking about earth because it says the country. But we found out that there are principalities, what? That are where? That are invisible in heaven as well. Now, what territory has Satan been given? Satan has been given the earth, but his power is evil. His power, guess what Satan's purpose is? Satan's purpose is to do 2 things that people don't really get it. Satan's purpose is to test and try and manifest the hearts of man. That's one. He does that through things that we call temptation. That's what Satan's number 1 responsibility is. And then once that person has failed their test, their temptation, their trial, consistently enough to convince the Most High that this person ain't going to change, then Satan's second responsibility kicks in, and that is to chastise. That's what he's there for. So when you read the scriptures about Job, what was Satan sent to do? He was sent to test Satan, to test Job. Think about that. But when you read in other circumstances, like Paul mentions, I believe in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, maybe 2 Corinthians chapter 5, chapter 6, I'm trying to think of which one it is, where Paul mentions about how in the Corinthians there was someone among the congregation who was so forward as to take his own father's wife. And he said, lest such an one be delivered to Satan for the delivering of his soul, for the delivering of his spirit. So that shows you that that's where his aspect as a chastiser is what is manifested. And the scriptures tell you that as far as that realm goes, that is what Satan presides over. So when you hear the verses in Ecclesiastes chapter 38 or 39 in the Apocrypha, where it says there be spirits that are created for vengeance, who lay sore upon strokes, that principality belongs to Satan. You understand? That's a heavenly principality. Now, every country has its earthly principality, its territory, and its military to defend its territory, its integrity, right? But they have a spirit that go before them. And that's what Christ is telling Daniel. Let me drink this water with my alarm. Christ is telling Daniel, from the first time that from the moment that you begin to chastise yourself before the Most High, I heard your prayer, but I couldn't come. Because what does he say? First of all, let's finish this. Let's read that verse one more time. I'm going to get Colossians chapter. You can remove the definition. Colossians chapter 1 and verse 16 again.
Colossians chapter 1 and verse 16. For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones.
Stop right there. Go one at a time. So you got thrones on earth, but they don't call them thrones no more because they got this image that they're trying to maintain. But the White House would be a throne, huh? The Kremlin would be a throne. Is it, what throne would that be in England? Is that Buckingham Palace? Hell, I don't know.
No, Buckingham Palace is where they live.
Okay, so I don't know what the seat of the government, what is that place called?
House of Commons?
Okay, whichever one it is. I'm not necessarily speaking concerning the group, but whatever building, like you said, they called it Washington, D.C. was communicating with the Kremlin, but wasn't no two cities talking. They're saying the president of the United States was speaking with the prime minister of Russia. That's what that statement means. And so Joe Biden or Washington, D.C. were in talks with Taiwan. No, he wasn't talking to no land. He's talking about the two governments. But those are principalities on earth. And the person set over it is the prince, the earthly prince. But then you also, for each country, you got what? You have a spiritual, a heavenly principality and a prince that resides over them. And this is who Christ was contending with. Hold on, before I move forward. Mild Water, was your comment related or question to this? Go ahead, Art.
It was just trying to get the explanation in more detail of what principality is. And I read in the scripture about how Michael was going to, it was either Michael or Christ fight in a battle with Moses or something like that. It was in the New Testament.
No, brother, that's different. You're talking about Michael the archangel this is in the book of Jude, contending for the bones of Moses. Michael the archangel Satan was contending for the bones of Moses, and Michael was the one who, in the name of the Most High, rebuked him. That's what you're referring to. I'm letting you know that's the issue with whether you had two principalities, but that verse is to let us know here on earth in Israel, there are men that are so evil that they don't respect the principalities. It doesn't say principalities in that chapter. It says dominions and dignities. Okay? On earth, the dominion, like you guys' school is a dominion. It's a spiritual dominion on earth, right? There are angels that preside over them in the spirit. How do you know that? Because when you read Revelation chapter 1 on through chapter 4, John is given by Christ letters to write to the angel of the church that is in Thyatira. To the angel, he didn't say write the head. I want you to write, I want you to write Theophilus. Tell him I don't like what's going down. Now that's who he wanted, but he didn't address the person. He addressed it in the spirit, the angel of the church of Philadelphia, to the angel of the church of Sardis, to the angel of the church. Why? Because the spirit of the Most High would see to it that letter made its way to the person in charge. So in the spiritual realm, there's an angel that presides over San Antonio. And then there are things that the Most High have in the spirit happen so that the needed information can be brought to a war's attention. That's how we ended up getting purged, Doc. That's what happened with Barnabas and that whole episode. How did that come about? All of that was spiritual, because it all started off with things getting out of hand for Barnabas, and he reached out to me and brought two brothers in council. He brought Tazapah and the deceased brother Ashar, and had an issue with them being productive or brotherly. He really couldn't describe what his issue was, but it was from that dynamic that myself, who had not been actively involved in San Antonio's affairs for at that time 18 years, hands-on, because I don't believe in getting in all these brothers. Y'all, you guys know me. You do your damn work. I'll deal with the top man. It turned out the top man wasn't being forthwith with me. He wasn't being upfront and right. So the Most High had some contention happen that left him dissatisfied, that resulted in him calling me, who before that he wanted me in his affairs. And I believe in giving him space. But he reached out, and that started what? A chain of events that brought me back into teaching. And then all of a sudden, one of the sisters consistently enough saw me teaching, and after class came and said, I need to talk to you. And then she was the one that the Most High used to expose what Barnabas was doing. That's all of that was done in our realm. I had to call the one and say, brother, according to this sister, this is what took place. You got to have a council, man. Then the war said, you got to have Mashaba, Barnabas, and whoever there. But who was behind her coming forth? Who was behind the Most High making Barnabas discontent and reaching out to me so that the congregation can see, oh, he does answer to somebody? That was the spirit, the angel that's over San Antonio, Texas. That principality belongs to him. That's his dominion, and he is the spiritual dignity involved, whatever his name is. And all the angels that are under it that be watching us all. Now, the Most High have the very same dynamic in the physical realm. So Daniel is being told by Christ that from the time that you began to humble yourself, let's go back to that verse, Amiyatazah. This verse was good enough, right? Dawiyat, you saw that?
I'm good.
In Colossians chapter 1 and verse 16. Was that sufficient for you? Do you understand at least through that?
I understand the concept.
Are you sure? Don't be saying con if that's not the case.
I get the concept. I get the idea that there's always when you went to an angel of the church, I understood.
Okay, I didn't call the verse out, but I called the chapters out. It's from chapters 1 all the way to. Matter of fact, let's actually go and read that for the example. So listen here in Romans, right? In Colossians chapter 1 and verse 16, it says, "For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him." Well, that just lets us know that just like in the realm that we dwell in, and there's order, there's certain realms of authority that exist, but it's like that in the spiritual realm. So now, how are things brought about on earth? I'm going to give you a couple of examples. We're going to deal with Old Testament and New Testament examples of how things that transpire on earth are the result of decisions that have already been made, and even councils that have been held in the spiritual realm. So we'll begin with the New Testament where we are. Let's go to Revelations chapter 1, but I'm going to find the specific verse where it starts off at, so we ain't got to read the whole book just to get to the point. Okay. In Revelations chapter 1, Christ is talking about, listen to this, read verse 11 first. Read verse, you're in Revelation chapter 1, so read verse 10 and 11.
Revelation chapter 1 and verse 10. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet, saying, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. And what thou seest, write in a book, and send it unto the 7 churches which are in Asia.
So this is, listen, this is the spirit, this is the physical aspect. He said, write these letters and send them to these churches. That means he's talking about sending them to whatever bishop was in charge, whatever steward was in charge. He's talking fleshly now. Go ahead, Ak, you gonna name the churches?
Unto Ephesus, and unto Smyrna, and unto Pergamos, and unto Thyatira, and unto Sardis, and unto Philadelphia, and unto Laodicea.
Now, those are the 7 churches that he got to write to the elders, so to speak. Now, let's go to chapter 2 and listen to what he says in verse 1.
Revelation chapter 2 and verse 1. Unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write, these things save he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks.
Now, right. So he's talking to what? He's talking to John and telling him to write to the angel. Because why? Because it's the spirit that was going to make sure that the letter and whatever needed to be addressed got brought forth to whoever the elder or the bishop was. But first, in chapter 1, he addresses the earthly principality, which are 7 churches, right? And then clearly those that are in charge on the earth. But to see to it that the letter and the message got there, he's telling them, address this, send this to the angel. But he's still sending it to the person on earth. But he's letting you know the spirit, the angel that's responsible is going to see to it that that elder, that bishop gets it. Because that's how the Most High be operating now. You can't hide nothing from him. You can't hide, brother, he's there. So, that's what he says, right? Then I want you to go to verse 8. Jump down to verse 8.
Revelation chapter 2 and verse 8. And unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things save the first and the last, which was dead and is alive.
And as you continue all the way to chapter 4, all of chapter 3 into chapter 4, that's how he addresses every location. There are principalities that are over all of us. And so that's in the New Testament. Now, the same thing happens in the Old Testament when the Most High wanted, for instance, King Ahab. When Israel, go to 2 Chronicles chapter 18. We're not going to read the whole chapter. We're going to read just enough so that the point is made and you all can read this on your own. 2 Chronicles chapter 18, let me get there. And I'm going to go right to the verse that exposes that emphasizes the point that we're making. So, what took place is the king of Jerusalem, whose name was Jehoshaphat, visited up north the king of Israel, whose name was Ahab. And Ahab was trying to convince or persuade Jehoshaphat to go to war with him against the Syrians over some territory that we had lost because of our wickedness, and the Most High had the Syrians take it from us. Right? Go ahead, Amayetas. I want you to start off at verse 18. Let me see. Yes, verse 18.
Second Chronicles chapter 18 and verse 18. Again he said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting upon his throne.
Now this is a prophet whose name was Micaiah. Micaiah was called Jehoshaphat. Once the king Ahab said, will you go to war with me against the Syrians? He said, well, let's see what the Lord have to say. So Ahab called 400 prophets who all together, hands down, said they gave everyone their little saying and showed their little parabolical image of how the Most High would give them the victory. But Jehoshaphat still wasn't satisfied after hearing 400 of recognized and known prophets that were saying, go, the Lord is with you. There was something in him that wasn't satisfied. He said, is there one more? So they brought forth this guy named Micaiah, And Ahab said, I don't like him. I hate him. He always prophesies evil against me. So this is Ahab speaking. What they wanted to know was, how come all of these prophets spoke favorably, but yet Jehoshaphat don't trust him? Start off at 18 again, Amayatazar.
Second Chronicles chapter 18 verse 18.
You got to come closer to your microphone at least.
Second Chronicles chapter 18 and verse 18. Again he said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting upon his throne, and all the host of heaven standing on his right hand and on his left.
So this is Micah said, this is the vision I got. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all of the armies, the hosts mean armies, multitudes of heaven sitting to his right hand and to his left. Go ahead.
Verse 19. And the Lord said, who shall entice Ahab, king of Israel, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one spake, saying after this manner, and another saying after that manner.
That means the Lord said, listen, King Ahab done outgrown himself. He's smelling his piss. I want him to fall in battle. How can we do it? How can we get Ahab to go and commit to war so he could die? And it says one spirit spoke and said this, meaning all the angels started giving what? Their suggestions. Man, we can get that nigga high. You know, whatever it is they were saying, they was dropping their suggestions. Go ahead, Amayatazar, call the verse out.
Second Chronicles chapter 18 and verse 20. Then there came out a spirit and stood before the Lord and said, I will entice him. And the Lord said unto him, wherewith?
That means one special spirit came out and said, I could do it. The Lord said, how? And he's going to tell you what his idea was. This is a spirit talking to the Most High. Go ahead.
Verse 21. And he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, thou shalt entice him, and thou shalt also prevail. Go out and do even so.
So the Lord said, I like that idea because the kings, they be relying on the prophets. That's a good idea. Going out there and be what? A lying tongue in the mouth of all of his prophets, because he will believe them. So that shows you the Most High. That means that spirit stepped from the left side of the Most High and said, I could do this. Go ahead, I'm going to get to our final verse. Verse 21. I'm sorry, verse 22.
Verse 22. Now therefore, behold, the Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of these thy prophets, and the Lord hath spoken evil against thee.
See that he said, so what does that show us, Dawiyad? That shows us that the thing that took place on earth, now when you read the rest of this chapter, Micah is telling what happened. You would think that the king would be like, well, shit, I ain't going to war. But the king had one of his prophets come and hit Micaiah in the jaw. He said, did you see the spirit coming? Did the spirit tell you it was going to come? Somebody was going to come and do that? That's what he said. Which way would the spirit forth to hit your ass, nigga? Did you see that one coming? Right? And Micah said, if you're gonna be in your chambers hiding, he said, if that don't happen, then surely the Lord did not speak to me. But at the end of this chapter, that king dies. Because he disregarded the word. Because why? Because we just read the Most High wanted him, even if he heard the truth, it still didn't detain him from going. Because why? Because the Lord wanted him to go. So he went and trusted the what? The word of the 400 prophets who had lied. And they weren't liars. The Most High wanted what? Him to trust those prophets. They were recognized trustworthy prophets, but this time it was meant for Ahab to fall. That's how it is. Those are the principalities at work. Okay? All right. Now, let's go back to Daniel chapter 9 again. I'm sorry. We were in Daniel chapter 10, right? Because in Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, we were dealing with the thought that said, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city. Well, we know that what? That during the time of the Messiah and afterward, there were the only people there that came were the Romans. Okay, so we left off on the design Daniel chapter 10. And I want you to read once again, verse 13. No, verse 12 and 13. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Daniel chapter 10, verse 12 and 13 again.
Daniel chapter 10 and verse 12. Then said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God, for thy power, thy words were heard, and I'm come for thy words.
So he's like, your words were this is how you know we're talking about Christ. Why? See, people don't be getting this. The other angels don't receive the prayers of Yahweh Shai. Yahweh Shai is the mediator between us and the Most High. Go ahead, Art.
Verse 13. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days.
He said, but that whole 20-day period that you were fasting and praying, I was busy. The spiritual entity who is responsible for the advancement of the Persians was here, man. And he withstood me for 21 days. Go ahead.
But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me.
When he said Michael, one of the chief princes, Michael in chapter 12 is referred to as our prince. He said, I had to get Michael and leave him in charge. This is how you know it's talking about Christ. Because Michael is the archangel of war. And at the end of this chapter, it tells you what we're reading about is warfare on earth, warfare in heaven that transpires on earth. And that I should say like this, the warfare on earth that is dictated by the activity in the spiritual realm. And so what we're reading about is what Christ says at the end of this chapter is that the only other angel that has something to know in these matters of war is Michael. So here we are. He's saying the prince of Persia, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. In other words, those spiritual entities that determine which nation comes, which nation rises and which falls, they're called princes. And so when it said the prince, the people of the prince that shall come, the people of the coming prince was talking about the Romans. How do we know that? Because he keeps mentioning what? At the time of the Messiah. And so we know that Christ, 33 AD, was crucified, died, was resurrected and ascended. And then 37 years later, Jerusalem was destroyed. It was the Romans. So the powers, the prince of the people that would come is talking about the spiritual entities that what? That would usher in the Romans. Go ahead, Ak.
Okay. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia.
So he was battling with the king. Now, when he said the kings, meaning these spiritual principalities determine what would take place on earth. Now let's go read this. Let's go read that. Yes, it does happen in warfare. Go to, let me get my apocrypha real quick. Go to Maccabees. I'll tell you if it's first or second. It might be second Maccabees chapter 5. Let's go there first. Second Maccabees chapter 5. Yes, second Maccabees chapter 5. And you're going to read verses 1 through 4. Now, what does this show? This shows that there was a battle getting ready to take place on earth. And the people in the ancient days saw the war being waged out by spirits and angels in heaven. They saw it. So second Maccabees chapter 5 and verses 1 through 4. Go ahead, Ak.
Second Maccabees chapter 5 and verse 1. About the same time, Antiochus prepared his second voyage into Egypt. And then it happened that through all the city, for the space almost of 40 days, there were seen horsemen running in the air, in cloth of gold, and armed with lances, like a band of soldiers.
So guess what they saw? They saw the principalities of both armies in the heavens warring. They saw the Seleucid dynasty, principalities, or I should say the principalities, the angelic forces that were going before the Seleucid dynasty. And on earth, the Seleucid at the time was Antiochus Epiphanes. And he was headed down to what? To wage war against the Ptolemaic dynasty and what? And the person that was, and the king of the family that was in charge at that time. Yes, my water.
You saying like the angels like were fighting each other? I mean, not like. Well, I mean, what was that the case a lot?
Why don't we say that again?
Like they're fighting with each other like the horsemen.
Let's read it, Ak. Let's continue to read. Watch what he says. Read it again from the top, Ak, verse 1.
Verse 1. About the same time, Antiochus prepared his second voyage into Egypt. And then it happened that through all the city, for the space almost of 40 days, there were seen horsemen running in the air, in cloth of gold, and armed with lances like a band of soldiers.
Go ahead.
And troops of horsemen in array, encountering and running one against another, with shaking of shields, and multitude of pikes, and drawing of swords, and casting of darts, and glittering of golden ornaments, and harness of all sorts.
So yes, that's what they saw. It says the horsemen running one against another, casting darts, shaking, showing their shields and doing their sword. But now the people on earth couldn't interpret, listen to what each one thought, what each one hoped in verse 4.
Verse 4. Wherefore every man prayed that apparition might turn to good.
So everyone thought that that was a good apparition, a good omen for their part. But this little battle that you see right there, that you read about, is also mentioned in First Maccabees chapter 1, starting off at verse 16. Right? When Antiochus decided he would have him 2 realms, and he went down to go and take the spoils of the king of Egypt. And that dynamic is what chapter 11 of Daniel is about, when it talks about the king of the north and the king of the south. The king of the north is the Greek dynasty of the Seleucids, and the king of the south is the Greek dynasty of the Ptolemies. All right, so but we went here to show you that what? That when Christ said the king or the prince of Persia withstood me for 21 days, and I had to get Michael, and I was there, but that was what was taking place, what? In the spiritual realm, because it was an omen, a sign of things that were coming. Why? Because Daniel is in Babylon. Who took down the Babylonians, y'all? The Persians. So their principalities were already being called upon. All right. Okay. Now, Christ, yes.
My brother, I heard y'all, because I was catching class on the way over here, but I heard you breaking down principalities, and I heard you give a definition, but the Zondervan has a better definition for principality.
Go ahead and read it.
Principality says,
You got it. Listen, Tazapah, you have to come a little closer, because anything from that level behind the mic, the computer catches the microphone broken up.
principle, order of powerful angels and demons.
Hey, listen, and that's concise and cold-blooded to the point. Read it, repeat it again, please.
Order of powerful angels and demons.
And that's the truth, but the issue is they exist on earth, and you have principalities. What? For the principalities, the earthly principalities, there are their spiritual counterparts that precede them, just like we got angels, The scriptures tell you that what? The angel of the Lord encampeth about them that love him, right? Then there was a time when Elisha was being summoned by a king, right? And his understudy, the one who would have been the up-and-coming prophet had he not went for money or gold after, for payment, was Gehazi. Gehazi was afraid, and he said, Lord, please open the eyes of this lad so that he can see that they that are with us are more than they that are with them. And he says he saw horsemen in flaming chariots all throughout the mountainside. And that's the truth about how the spirits roll with us. That's why you got to be righteous, huh? You got to stand up for what's right. If you ain't willing to stand up for what's right and fight, that's why that verse, lately I've been repeating that verse in Psalms 94 and verse 16. Who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? I ain't talking about we've never been talking about the white man. It's been talking about the evil in Israel. And that's what the prophets that's what Elijah had to do in his day. The evil in Israel being what? Led by a Canaanite princess named Jezebel and the Israelite king that married her. Then what? Then Elisha inherited the evil among Israel of his day. And now we just got to read what? Micaiah had to deal with the evil of his day. But them principalities are here, brother. They're here right now, all around us. And then you got like Taza Pop brought out, you got the demons waiting for somebody to harbor the wrong thought and to dare say it. Then they're waiting for the other person to feed into it. Why? Because it takes what we do that summonses our actions and our words and our thoughts, summons the evil spirits and the good spirits to whatever degree we engage them. So if we keep evil, if we harbor evil thoughts, them demons is there, but they're not empowered until we speak. But then what happens? Then the brothers that got the righteous, they got to put that in check. They don't put it in check, the negative principality begins to what? Get ground in the physical world. All right? So thank you for that. You ain't lying, but that one, it was brief, but it couldn't get no more surgical than that. Amayetazal, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going back to Daniel chapter 10. I want you to read now verse 13 once more and move forward.
Daniel chapter 10 and verse 13. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia.
So now who is he talking about? He's talking about the spiritual entities in heaven, because this wasn't taking place on earth. Trying to think of remember, Persia was at this point in charge. So what is Persia doing now? What is the kings of Persia? What are the princes of Persia doing? How do we know Persia was in charge? Because in the beginning of Daniel chapter 9, we found out that what? That Darius, the son of Osiris, this of the seed of the Medes, was put over the king. Oh, he was made king over the Chaldeans. Who put him there? Cyrus, the Persian. So if the Persians are fighting, if the prince of the Persians are fighting Christ, what are they doing? They're fighting to retain power. And the Greeks, the prince of the Greeks, are being ushered in. Go ahead, because I continue to read. You're in verse what? 15 now?
Yep. Daniel chapter 10.
Yes.
Daniel chapter 10.
Hold on. Yeah, continue. But I want you to read through these kind of speedily so we can get to the point.
Okay. Daniel chapter 10 and verse 14. Now I come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days. For yet the vision is for many days. And when he had spoken such words unto me, I set my face toward the ground, and I became dumb. And behold, one like the similitude of the sons of men touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spake, and said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength.
Go ahead.
For how can the servant of this my Lord, talk with this my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remained no strength in me.
He said the presence of the angels sapped him of all of his strength. I can't stop. They can be having these Edomites and people talking about, and the angel came. The angel ain't came to you. Your ass will be burnt to a crisp. The Most High tell you that the spirit The Most High say that the eyes of the Lord are 10,000 times brighter than the sun. Do you know what when they're giving orders, they have to configure themselves for us to be able to withstand that power. Right? That's why Daniel, Ezekiel, and everybody else said they fell flat on their face. Go ahead. Verse 18.
Verse 18. Then there came again and touched me one like the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me.
Continue.
And said, O man, greatly beloved, fear not, peace be unto thee. Be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. Then said he, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come.
So this chapter, he's following the succession of what? Of the order of them 4 kingdoms that we've been reading about since Daniel chapter 2, then Daniel chapter 7, then Daniel chapter 8. And now we're here in Daniel chapter 9, and in verse 26, the Romans are already being spoken of now. And that's why it says the prince of the people that shall come. But how do we know it's the Romans and it doesn't say so? Because it said at the time or after the time that the Messiah be cut off. Now, before that time, let's do this. I'm going to read that verse one more time, 20, and then finish with 21, and let's go back to chapter 9.
Daniel chapter 10 and verse 20. Then said he, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come.
So he's talking about what? The spiritual principalities that he would have to contend with are reflective of what had been prophesied that would transpire on earth. Now, even ourselves, our time is coming. Before you go back to chapter 9, just read read Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1 only.
Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up.
Now, what happens is in the last verse in chapter 10, Christ is preparing Daniel to get this message that talks about the first 3 kings of Persia, then the ongoing battle with a civil war. I shouldn't say civil war because it wasn't a civil war, but it was a battle between the two dominant Greek dynasties. That's what Daniel chapter 11 is about. And it takes us all the way up into the days that we live in. It talks like, for instance, when you go and you read from verses like 40 on of Daniel chapter 11, it's talking about what's going on in the Middle East right now. And the kingdoms that he tells you are going to be peace, that they won't be getting bothered, you'll go back and you'll find out they're not the ones getting bothered out. It's the coldest thing. For instance, out of all those Middle Eastern countries, how come you ain't hearing shit about Jordan? Because in Daniel chapter 11, it lets you know Jordan wasn't going to get fucked with. But it doesn't call it Jordan. It calls it the territory that Jordan occupies today. It's the coldest deal. Like it tells you Moab, Ammon, they ain't going to have no problems. That's Jordan today. Then one of the names of the cities of Jordan is Ammon. It still carries the Old Testament name, huh? But you've been seeing Syria is embroiled right now. Palestine is embroiled. Gaza, Lebanon, constantly going back and forth with the Israeli regime. Egypt fell. Iraq fell. Syria is going up in flames. Nothing's taking place in Jordan. Why? Because the scripture's been prophesied. So when you read that, all of chapter 11, then it brings us into the last days. And that's why it says at that time, read that verse 1 again of chapter 12.
Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince.
I'm going to show you something. I've got to say this out. Read chapter 11 and verse 41.
Daniel chapter 11 and verse 41. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these
Now,
shall
when he said
escape.
a glorious land, he's literally talking about our land. But our land is divided among the Palestinians, it's divided among the Israelis, it's divided among the people of Syria. Go ahead.
Daniel chapter 11 and verse 41. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon.
Now, when you go to the old day map and you look up Ammon, Moab, and Edom, all that territory is the country of Jordan that you ain't heard a peep from. Everybody, I'm talking about from the days of 2011 when the Arab Spring got kicked off. When a 40 years old ally of the United States got ran out, right? The United States decided to abandon him, and that's one of the places where the Arab Spring kicked off. Hosni Mubarak. Then the King Ali of Algeria, Muammar Gaddafi, right, of Libya. Bashar al-Assad is still under fire right now. Saddam Hussein fell. Think about all of this, and right there in the middle of it all those territories. Do me a favor, Amayatazar, put up the map. First, we're going to put up the map, biblical map, Edom, Ammon, and Jordan. I'm sorry, Edom, Ammon, and Moab. Then after, I want y'all to take a look at it and look at the landmarks, right? You're going to probably see the Sea of Galilee. You're going to see the Jordan River, right? Then we're going to go and get the map of Jordan. You can be like, damn. And you ain't heard nothing about Jordan. King Hussein and his son is chilling, huh? I'm just trying to show you that that's what this string of prophecies that Christ came and gave Daniel. He's preparing them in chapter 10. And in chapter 11, he gives us a breakdown of what takes place from the time of Cyrus all the way to the time of today. Then in chapter 12, he tells us about our prince. We got principalities also. So once you get that, while he's getting that, yeah, go ahead, he got it. Okay, look at that. Okay, that's beautiful. You see that body of water. You see the Gulf of Aqaba. You see Edom, you see Moab, and you see Ammon. All right? Okay, Amayatazar, let's go and get, just go get Jordan, Brother, there's times when the Most High, brother, brings some things out, and I'm not gonna lie, it scares the hell out of me because people they don't understand. You know, people generally know that the Bible is real, but they don't really know how real, and they really don't know. But this thing is so accurate that it's terrifying. Now look at those bodies of water. That shit encompasses Jordan. Look at it. It encompasses Moab, Edom. You look at the bodies of water. Those were our landmarks. So remember, it said in the Holy Lands that what? That there would be many falling. He shall enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. So you're talking about Israel got overthrown. Israel is the one, the aggressor. Then you talk within Israel, you see Gaza and the West Bank. All of that is what? All of that is where the Palestinians have been reduced in their little encampments. Then you got the Golan Heights. You got Syria's under fire. You got Lebanon. They're all at war. Right? You got Iraq up to the northeast. You got Egypt down to the south. And you ain't heard nothing in Jordan. And you see that that's the land of Moab, Edom, and Ammon. Now that's scary, That's powerful. All righty. Thank you, Amayatazar.
Hey,
Yes.
I was looking at wars in Jordan.
Say that again.
I was looking up wars in Jordan,
Uh-huh.
and it said that Jordan is often portrayed as the only stable patch in a chaotic Levant.
See that? And the Levant is just another name for the Fertile Crescent. That means from Babylon moving up into Syria, coming down to Canaan, and all the way down into Egypt, it's the Fertile Crescent. It follows the Tigris and Euphrates up north, then it follows the Jordan coming on down, and then the Nile going down. And it's the what? It's the most stable. That's Daniel chapter 11, verse 41.
Right. They had like some internal conflicts, but nothing like don't.
Well, remember, when we finally get to Daniel chapter 11, you're reading about foreign encroachment, foreign incursions. Every nation got internal shit.
Right.
But the scriptures say that they wouldn't fall to what? And be overthrown by this external force. I'm saying external force only because we didn't break it down Daniel chapter 11, so I can't give as much detail as I would like to. Okay, I just wanted to make that point. So all the way from the time of Persia up until now, this thing is happening, and the time is going to come when the Most High is going to activate our principalities. I'm going to read that verse one more time, Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, then we'll go back to chapter 9.
Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people.
So Michael is our prince. Every nation got one out. And he is headed by, well, we'll go back. We're going to go back, I'm sorry, to Daniel chapter 10 and clear up why it says Daniel, why it says Michael. We continue out.
And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book.
So these are the signs that we know how to look for, right? We know how to look for all the problems, but then also you got to look for the places where the Most High said there wouldn't be no problems. That's just as much as a confirmation. Now, Amayatazar, go back to chapter 10, read verse 20 and 21, and then we'll go back to chapter 9. Hey, was that you, Nagaha?
Come on,
Hey, that was some cold shit right there, brother. You have to excuse my Hebrew. You know, people like to say excuse my French. You have to excuse my Hebrew, but that was some cold shit. That's cold, huh?
that's crazy, huh?
Isn't it? That was said the level of accuracy of the scriptures is terrifying. Go ahead, Amayatazar.
Daniel chapter 10 and verse 20. Then said he, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am done forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come. For I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth. And there is none that holdeth with me in these things, but Michael your prince.
So Christ is the only one that knows who the Most High have given everything to, huh? And especially in matters of what? Of war, of the successions of kingdoms. When you read Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1, 2, and 3, and it says by whom he made the worlds, it's talking about Christ. He's the express image of the invisible God, by whom all the worlds were made. It ain't talking about planets, it's talking about all of the civilizations. The Most High uses Christ to usher these kingdoms in, huh? That's in Daniel chapter 4 and verse 17. That what? That the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of man. And he's the one that appoints, he said, even the basis of men. It's all done. People don't understand. Christ is the breathing, living will of the Most High. When it says the word is the will of the Most High. Everything that the Most High wants to get done, Christ sees to it that it gets done. Even if he have to do it himself or appoint other angels, it's him. Just like when the Most High said, let there be light, and then he turned around and had Christ create everything else. That's who he is. He's the one that facilitates the will of the Most High. All right, done. So, Elisha, when we go back to chapter 9 and verse 26, I'm yet to read that verse up until where you read it last time, to the destroying of the city, okay?
Daniel chapter 9, and verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city.
So common sense, I'm sorry, that's a lot. It's not common sense. History teaches us that who was the people that came after the death of the Messiah? When the Messiah was cut off, who was the ones that was used to cut him off? It was the Roman. We just read it in John chapter 11, right? He said, wait a minute, man, we can't let this dude keep on raising people from the dead. If we let this thing slide, he said, everybody will follow him, and then the Romans will come and take our place and our nation. So this is who that's talking about. It's talking about the coming of the Romans. Now it's giving us prophecy, but in verse 26, verse 27, you're going to come back and fill in the details of what would happen between the death of Christ. Actually, what would happen from the time when the commandment went forth to rebuild up until after the death. There's a lot that happened, and verse 27 alludes to it, and we're going to drop it. Go ahead, Amiyatazah. So finish up verse 26, but from the top again. Hold up. Elisha.
Quick question. So, the people of the prince isn't referring to Israel of Michael, but rather Romans.
Yeah. I just went to Daniel chapter 10 to show you that's how those principalities are spoken of concerning those of us that are on earth. Right? Christ said the prince of what? Of the Persians, man. But it was in heaven, but what was happening? On earth, the Persians were fighting to retain their power. Then he said, after them, the prince of the Greeks shall come. And so now that's in Daniel chapter 10, but here he's talking about the prince of the people during the time after the Messiah. By the time the Messiah came, the Greeks were long gone. Jerusalem was taken, Jerusalem was fought over from the time of I would just say like 200 BC. Right? What I have to do me a favor, Amiyatazah. Maybe let's put it like this. I want to go from the first battle. I'm going to show y'all something real quick. Let me see. In chapter 11, maybe I shouldn't go that. Maybe I shouldn't. Let's just real quick go to chapter 11. I'm going to get this out and read verses 1. Read on down. I'll just start off with verse 1. I'm going to show you this, Elisha. This is, in other words, he's going to do a whole lot of reiterating. But what he's talking here, he didn't earlier refer to as the dynamic in heaven. But now he's talking about how it's going to transpire on earth. Go ahead, Amiyatazah. Daniel 11 and verse 1.
Daniel chapter 11 and verse 1. Also, I in the first year of Darius, also me, even I, stood to confirm and to strengthen him.
Daniel is talking about how he served Mede. He served Darius the Mede. Go ahead.
Verse 2. And now will I show thee the truth.
No. This is a continuation of Yahweh Shai telling Daniel, I'm the one that made sure Darius the Mede. I'm sorry, y'all. It's like they got chapters, but the message, it's back in the old scriptures, they didn't break up. There wasn't no thing where you broke up and then had the chapter. It was just the book of Daniel. So he's continuing. He said, and I'm the one that made sure that Darius the Mede was appointed. I stood to strengthen him. Go ahead. Now, who did he do that to? He did that to the king of Babylon. The principalities of Babylon were fighting, but their time had come. So Christ is telling you, he was the one making sure what? He was fighting on behalf of the Persians. Because that's who seated Darius. You go back to like Daniel chapter 6, Daniel chapter 5, it tells you that's after the vision. Remember the vision of the writing on the wall where the Babylonian king was having a banquet? And they told him his kingdom was divided, he's been measured and found wanting. It says that night he died Babylon was taken, he was killed, and Darius the Mede was put over. Christ was the one behind that, and that's what he's telling you here. It's a cold deal, This is Yahweh Shai doing it all. Go ahead, Amiyatazar. Don't worry, y'all. We're going to get to chapter 11. All right? And then we're going to have to spend some mad time because it's a whole lot of reading now. You're talking about Apocrypha. You're talking about Josephus. We're talking about, listen, I'm not going to lie. I would like to treat it like a university. That's why I like to do it all of it and take our time and get it so that you know you got it. Some yokel going to come and say that ain't it. No, you're going to have so much reading, it's going to get sickening. I'm not going to lie. You're going to be dreaming about it at night. You're going to have shit like Antiochus and solutions in your head. You're going to see it. You're going to see how the Pharisees got into power. But this is all cold. It's all seamless. Who were the hardest of the Israelites? Who was the hardest of the Israelites, y'all? There was this group of brothers that the scriptures don't even say that again, the Essenes, They was bad, They were bad. And that's why Christ don't even mention them. Because when you go back and you read the history on them, they were the most that were Christ-like, The only division that existed between them were those of their members that continued to marry so that they could keep their line going. The other men didn't even marry because they said there is no woman that's loyal to one man, not even in her heart. She might be with you by herself, but her mind, and it tells you that they tend and create lasciviousness, which means they make you soft. But these brothers, and listen, to get up into their crew, you couldn't even roll with them until after 3 years they haven't been proved. You had one level of proof, then you had another 2 levels, brother, and then if you did some wrong shit, they punished you, they brought you to the brink of death. They didn't beat you. They just didn't give you no food. Your ass had to eat grass. And when they saw that it says you were at your last gasp, then they would say what you've done and what you've suffered was good enough. Then they bring you back in and nurture you like a brother. But you weren't going to be messing up their order, man. So you never heard Christ say, whoa, you hypocrites, SC. Because if there was anybody that, listen, when you read at the end of Acts chapter 2 and the end of Acts chapter 4, how the apostles got that, had all things in common and operated like that, brother, the Essenes have been doing that from the time of Maccabees. They didn't own nothing. You couldn't tell who the leader was. They were so cold-blooded that they were broken into 4 groups and that the seniors didn't mingle even with the young men because the young men were young men and they were too fucking weak. They didn't do anything that where that weakness could bleed up off them, and they were too strong for the young men. You had to grow up in them. By the time you come in 24, by the time you're 60, you've gone through a process where now you are the hardest of the hardest. These were the people like that was getting chopped up in the book of Maccabees and smiling out. Anyway, the point is, that's the type of reading we're going to do, brother. And you know what? It's good to know what stock you come from. It's good to know, we watch the movies like The fucking Patriot and Mel Gibson. I be liking these movies, right? I'm trying to think of this other one. Braveheart. But they're nothing. They're nothing. The Israelite Braveheart wouldn't even have a woman to be able to get killed. Just saying, what kept this nigga going was his bitch was always hiding behind the trees, and just her face was inspiring. If y'all remember Braveheart or The Patriot, one of them, right? And it's always some selfish shit. Y'all, let me. I'm letting go. I gotta get control of myself. But Israel didn't. The cream of the crop of Israel didn't operate like that, and we got to read that because it helps you to take that spirit, right, to lock into, and then to make sure that it is governed by Christ's teachings. Because you're going to read some things where they were like an excess. You're like, all right, now I don't know about all of that. But it's Christ. Like on the Sabbath day, them niggas didn't even go to the bathroom in a toilet. They are on during the week, and they had a designated area where they dug holes and kept paddles. So that on the Sabbath, it was considered too much work to go and comfort and ease to sit on a stool. So you have to go and do it in a hole. But the hole was previously dug so as not to do no work on the Sabbath. I'm like, man, but I'm gonna sit my ass on the stool on the Sabbath, brother. But I'm trying to show you there's certain things. It was about nothing soft, Doc. It was about, like they got that ghost with the red circle and the slash going through it, Ghostbusters, no ghost. Brother, there was about no weakness, no softness, no lasciviousness. So like I said, it's gonna actually be it's gonna be like entertaining. Like it's gonna really when I read it, it's like our version of an Indiana Jones adventure movie, man. That's how it reads for me. It's
bro,
fascinating, huh?
I don't think Israelites have truly checked out the definition of that word lasciviousness,
You
because
wanna put it up there? Well, do me a favor and put up lasciviousness.
1 second. I'm listening to you dropping this stuff. It's got me reminiscing of the good times.
Yeah, for real,
Lascivious.
too bad you gotta get old, gotta get old, brother.
Lascivious. Man, that hardness. Oh, I love it. Do you know what? Reading this it's really what's the word? It's really empowering, because I remember hold on, let me get the word up for you.
Listen to this, lascivious. Number one, loose, wanton. Wanton literally means indulgence without restraint. Lewd, lustful, lascivious men. Then it goes on to say what? Number two, soft, wanton, luxurious. That means that's too much comfort ruins the spirit of manliness. Yes, Elisha.
You want me to read in Josephus about the Essenes?
No, not now. That's for another lesson, because I ain't trying to take us off track. We're gonna get there. But thank you. Loose. Look at number two. Soft, So when the scriptures talk about men that have crept in and brought lasciviousness, like in the book of I'm trying to think of the last book of Jude, but he said these people came in and made these things soft. And in Jude verse 3, it tells you that what? That we were supposed to contend to deliver the gospel as it was delivered to us. And then how do we know how it was delivered? How many people did Christ send away crying? Not because he rejected them, but he told them how it was and they couldn't do it. Remember that one guy said, what must I do to gain eternal life? Christ said, keep the commandments. He said, well, which ones? Christ said, love thy neighbor, the whole thing. He said, well, all these I've kept from my youth up. Christ, he said, what lacketh I? Christ said, if thou will be perfect, then you want to really lock in, go sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and you come with me and teach the kingdom. And it said the man left and he wept bitterly because he had much riches. That's how hard Christ was. Another person said, I will follow thee whithersoever they go. Christ said, foxes have holes, the birds have air, in the air of the air have nests, but the Son of Man have not where to lay his head. That means I don't have them. I go where the day takes me. He's like John chapter 3 and verse 10. Or was it? Yeah, it was John chapter or Matthew chapter 3, verse 10. With Zacharias, Christ said, everybody that's born in the spirit is like the wind. It cometh and whirleth about and listeth where it will, but where it come from, you don't know, and where it go to, you don't know. Such is he that's born of the spirit. This life, listen, but when you acquiesce and submit to that, you get those virtues, and the Most High be with you. The Most High is not about softness. But anyway, thank you, Yetazar. Let's finish this up. Because we go for 2 hours now. Y'all gonna make me change up again. Right? Ain't nobody nodding tonight. I'll be feeling bad when y'all be then David and tow y'all the hill up. Shoot. So read that one more time. Now remember, we're back in Daniel Yetazar chapter 11, just to make a point. Chapter 11, verses 1, 2, and 3.
Daniel chapter 11 and verse 1. Also, I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all.
Go ahead.
And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia.
So this is talking about verse 2, the king that was far richer above all of them is talking about Xerxes. And he's the one, like in that movie 300, that stirred up all the realm of Greece, man. He was the one. So this, but listen, Now, Christ, this is what he's talking about the principalities. This is what's taking place on earth, but he's in the spiritual realm, seeing to it that what? That when the current or incumbent kingdom has to go, he ushers in the principalities against the principalities of the incumbent power to see to it that they are ushered out and defeated. So then you finally get to chapter 12 when it says, and at this time shall what? Michael, your prince. That means your time has come. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that out, all right? So we'll be getting to all of that. Amiyatazar, let's go back to chapter 9 and read verse 26 one final time. And you read it in its entirety now, please.
Daniel chapter 9, verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined.
So now he's giving us what? I can say an overview of things to come. Now, let's do this. When he says, and shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary, this is talking about 70 AD. This is talking about when, I'm going to give you guys some more homework, but let me get through this first. Let's prove what the flood is. That the flood, that type of speak, that parabolic talk is how the Most High is what he refers to as overwhelming military force. And I'm going to show you that. You got to go to Jeremiah. Let me see. It's a couple of them actually. Go to Isaiah chapter 59. In Isaiah chapter 59, you're going to read verses 18 through 20. Now, this is the Most High prophesying about kingdoms coming to destroy Israel, but this was way before the Romans. Isaiah chapter 59 and verse 18.
Isaiah 59 and verse 18. According to their deeds, accordingly he will repay. Fury to his adversaries.
Now, when you read, hold up. When you read Isaiah chapter 59, it's all about the evil of Israel. The Most High opens up by saying, man, my ears are not heavy. I hear you. My arms are not short. My arms, I can still reach you, but your sins and your iniquities have what? Put a wedge between you and me. Then he goes down and tell you all the evil that Israel is about, right? And that no one will stand up and do the right and fight for righteousness among this nation. So as a result, in verse 18, read it again.
Verse 18.
Yeah, that's it.
According to their deeds, accordingly he will repay. Fury to his adversaries, recompense to his enemies. To the islands he will repay recompense.
Go ahead.
So shall they fear the name of the Lord from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood.
There you go. When the enemy shall come, he's talking about what? The invasions, right? So shall they feel the name, meaning once I whoop their ass, right? And listen to what he says. When the enemy, so shall they fear the name of the Lord from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. Go ahead.
When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him.
Now, this is talking about what? How the Most High will redeem us from the flood of an enemy. Read on down.
Verse 20. And the Redeemer shall come to Zion, and unto them that turn from transgression in Jacob, saith the Lord.
That means those of us that will have come back to the Most High, those are the ones who's going to be what? Preserved from the flood of the enemy. Now from there, go to Jeremiah chapter 46. It's like a couple of them in Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 46, verses 1 through 10. Now remember, we're breaking down what it says in Daniel when it says, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Because when you go and you read this, the history on what took place, you had Titus. Vespasian was called in by Nero out of retirement, and he brought his legions. His son Titus converged with his legions, and another 2 or 3 legions came, brother, and they tore Israel's ass up. They came, they were called out during 66 BC, 66 AD. Nero lived up until about 69. And then Rome at the time entered into a civil war, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, those 3. They all kind of ruled and took each other out in a matter of like months. Then Vespasian became, after the destruction of Jerusalem, he was the cat that became the emperor, having destroyed Israel. It was, like I said, we're going to read it. Go ahead, Amiyatazar, read Jeremiah. What did I tell you? Chapter 46, verses 1 through 10?
Yeah.
Go ahead and read that. We're still emphasizing the flood.
Jeremiah
what the flood represents.
Jeremiah 46 and verse 1. The word of the Lord which came to Jeremiah the prophet against the Gentiles, against Egypt, against the army of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, which was by the river Euphrates in Carchemish, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, smote in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Joshua, king of Judah.
Go ahead.
Order ye the buckler and shield, and draw near to battle. Harness the horses, and get up, ye horsemen, and stand forth with your helmets.
Now the Most High is prophesying against Egypt, right? But guess what? This very same person the Most High is going to use to take out Israel, to take out Assyria. This is Babylon. This is when Babylon was being called upon. Go ahead.
Verse 4. Harness the horses, and get up, ye horsemen, and stand forth with your helmets. Furbish the spears, and put on the brigandines.
The brigandines are those military uniforms. Go ahead.
Verse 5. Wherefore have I seen them dismayed and turned away back? And their mighty ones are beaten down, and are fled apace, and look not back. For fear was round about, saith the Lord. Verse 6. Let not the swift flee away, nor the mighty man escape.
He's like, in other words, get everybody. Go ahead. You ain't going to be fast enough to get away from this. You're not going to be mighty enough to fight your way through what's coming. Go ahead. We're in chapter 46 in case you're looking. Oh, go ahead.
Jeremiah chapter 46 and verse 6. They shall stumble and fall toward the north by the river Euphrates. Who is this that cometh up as a flood, whose waters are moved as the rivers?
So this is who he's talking about. He's talking about this force that came with Nebuchadnezzar, but he's being referred to his military force as a flood. Go ahead.
Verse 8. Egypt riseth up like a flood, and his waters are moved like the rivers.
This is talking about Egypt mobilizing to what? To fight against the Babylonians, which they couldn't do. Go ahead.
And he saith, I will go up and will cover the earth. I will destroy the city and the inhabitants thereof. Come up, ye horses, and rage. Come up, ye horses, and rage, ye chariots. And let the mighty men come forth, the Ethiopians and the Libyans that handle the shield, and the Lydians that handle and bend the bow.
Go ahead.
Verse 10. For this is the day of the Lord, power of hosts, a day of vengeance, that he may avenge him of his adversaries. And the sword shall devour, and it shall be satiate and made drunk with their blood. For the Lord, power of hosts, have a sacrifice in the north country by the river Euphrates.
Right. So this is one of many prophecies. Matter of fact, go to the next chapter. Go to chapter 47. He's still talking about the flood. Let me see. This is. Hold up. Did I just lose my place? 40. Okay, yeah, okay. It's only 7 verses. Go ahead and read that.
Jeremiah chapter 47, verse 1. The word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against the Philistines, before that Pharaoh smote Gaza. Thus saith the Lord, behold, waters rise up out of the north, and shall be an overflowing flood, and shall overflow the land, and all that is therein, the city, and them that dwell therein. Then the men shall cry, and all the inhabitants of the land shall howl.
Go ahead.
At the noise of the stamping of the hoofs of his strong horses, at the rushing of his chariots, and at the rumbling of his wheels, the fathers shall not look back to their children for feebleness of hands.
Right, they're gonna be taking the hell off and abandoning their kids out. Let me say this. This was what the Most High brought upon that whole region. First, he prophesied against Egypt. Then he prophesied against what? Those neighboring areas, Philistine, right? Gaza. The point is, that's what the flood is talking about. But he's letting you know this is the effect that the Romans was going to have at the time they was to destroy Jerusalem. All right? Let's go back and read verse 26, and then we're done. Because verse 27, and we ain't gonna finish it. We got a whole lot of reading. We're gonna actually get this. Read verse 26, and then let's finish it, and then I'll prepare you for verse 27, because we're gonna be in verse 27 probably for a few weeks, because it's a whole lot of reading in Josephus. It's a whole lot, but it's all surgical. And I'll give you an example. Go ahead, Art.
Daniel
Verse
chapter
26.
Pardon?
Daniel chapter 9 and verse 26.
Yeah. Daniel chapter 9 and verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. And the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined.
So then, like I said, this is the Most High giving us an overview of what was coming. Now he's gonna give us some details of things that would take place from between, in other words, in between the time where the decree went out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, up until this time, there are things that had to happen. Verse 27, Amayetazar.
Verse 27. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week.
Now stop right there. He's talking about the Romans still. There was a time when there was a Roman who was one of the best allies and friends of Israel. Guess who that Roman was? Gaius Julius Caesar. And he was, let me say this, the first thing we're going to do, we got time to get into this. Let's go, because when he say he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, it's talking about the 3 people. Let me put it like this. The covenant, go to 1 Maccabees chapter 8. 1 Maccabees chapter 8, and you got, we're not going to get into the detail because I want to get down to the point. The point is, this is the first time Israel, representative is what I'm going to use, reached out in our need, in our war against the Seleucid dynasty, Antiochus Epiphanes, right? We reached out to the Romans, and the Roman that received us was actually Julius Caesar and the Senate. These are the things that we're going to read. So the covenant can't be confirmed until the covenant is established. Wrong or right? So we had to make a pact first, a covenant. Then after Judas fell in battle, his brother Jonathan went and confirmed the covenant with the same entity that Judas, the representative sent by Judas, and that was the Romans and the Spartans. The Romans were the power of the area of the time, the up and coming power of the time, and the Spartans were our brothers. It tells you that they were the seed of Abraham. Now, after Jonathan fell in battle, I'm just, like I said, I'm gonna give you an overview. It said he shall confirm the covenant with many. So the second one that went to confirm the covenant was Jonathan, who sent representatives to confirm the covenant established beforehand. Then when Jonathan fell in battle, Simon did the same thing, his brother. Then Simon had a son named John Hyrcanus. John went and established it. John had two sons, Aristobulus and Alexander Janus. Aristobulus was an asshole, but Alexander Janus and his wife, they were good, but then they had a son, Hyrcanus II. He witnessed that. It was a long time. And then came Caligula. And Caligula sent out a decree that his statue should be put in our temple on top of our altar and sacrifices made to him. The representative, the Roman general that he sent to get this done, was going back and forth with us trying to call for time. If we're going to go and read it, the Most High was getting in the way. When Caligula was put to death, that was the Most High defending us. We're going to read it. There was all type of stuff that was done. He sent a message to have the person who was his own person who was stalling for time to have him killed, and a storm. He kept that. The Most High brought a storm in the Mediterranean that kept that message from being delivered until Caligula could be killed. Doc, it was called. So all of this, there was a constant. It wasn't just one. There was a constant confirmation. And guess what the covenant was? Leave the Jews alone. Let them go ahead and follow their laws and let them pay us tribute, but let them have the 7th year off. That's their custom. Their land ain't gonna be productive if they don't. Brother, they listen, Pompey did the same thing. Julius Caesar, Gaius Julius Caesar, Gnaeus Magnus Pompey, Mark Antony, all of that you be seeing in the Cleopatra movies. Brother, we was down there helping Mark Antony whoop up on the Egyptians under Cleopatra. Right? So there was a whole lot that Israel did that is erased from history with the Romans. But you will find it in Josephus in great detail. So that's why I said we're going to actually be there. I shouldn't say weeks. We're going to be there for months. Because when you read, you have to read verse 27. We ain't going to read Maccabees tonight because I didn't spend the time explaining. I said I was going to give y'all an overview. You know we need time to be reading Maccabees, right? Maccabees is like Josephus Jr., right? It don't have as much detail, but it's a lot of reading. So you have to read Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27, please, and we'll start this reading next week.
Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease.
So this started with Caligula and was passed on through Nero. And when I say Nero, meaning during their reign as emperors, but hands-on, it was the different governors, the Roman governors and procurators that was going and doing excessive things against what was established. And that's what we got to read. Really, Caligula was the emperor that really wanted to put his image on the altar. But then Claudius was pulled in. Claudius was a little bit more passive. But Nero was the devil. And so Nero and all of his procurators was little by little chipping away at the agreements and the understandings that was made during the time of the Roman, when it was a republic. And when Caesar was a procurator, when Caesar was what they call an imperator, not an emperor, an imperator, then a consul, then a dictator. You can go into Josephus and find 13 edicts by Julius Caesar alone, then another 13 by the successors of him after his death, all confirming, let the Jews follow their laws. And so there came a time during the Roman emperor's succession that these agreements began to be chipped away chipped away at and infringed upon by the governors that were in Syria, by the governors that were in Judea, by the Roman governors people appointed. And so that's what that's the long history that we're gonna have to read. Yet does that go ahead?
Verse 27 from the top. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate.
That means what? That Israel was, when it says overspreading of abominations, then you're going to read about Simon, the last high priest, and how him and his I think it was his brother, I gotta go back and brush up, but how they were oppressive over Israel. Like the Most High, just like Antiochus. Why was Antiochus given that power of us? Brother, you're going to read it in the Josephus. It was because wicked ass Israel went and hired him. Wicked ass Israel was the one, when it says he came up and spake peaceably, it was the Israelites, the evil Israelites that let him in. Then he turned around and killed them as well. Every time we did some evil stuff, the Most High punished us with that person with whom we were doing the evil. So that's what all of this is talking about. So once we get into this, you guys, let me say this. I hope you don't get too bored, because that one verse is going to take us from, let me see if I can mention it. It's going to take us from Antiquities of the Jews. Yes. You got to speak up.
I know you always have commentary using movies sometimes. You have any classical, like,
Brother, you're breaking up. Just kind of keep your volume moderate. You know what? I can't hear you. You gotta get that mic is funny. Just get back to where Lamar. Okay, go ahead, right there.
You know?
Yes.
All right, I was saying, do you have any movies you can reference? I know you usually go with commentary and movies to paint the picture a lot of times.
Well, you know what? It's gonna be the backdrop, right? So, for instance, there's the only ones that give that type of history is old ones. So there's a movie called Quo Vadis. Quo Vadis, but you see, yeah, Quo Vadis is about. There's a movie called The Robe. The Robe is the movie that shows you what Caligula was doing.
Yeah, watch it. It's like it's
Right? It's funny because they be like mad gay. What? You dare not worship me? You just they be flamboyant as hell. But I'm gonna say this, they capture the spirit of how they used to roll. So the movie called the first one, I think, is called. Listen, it's two of them because there are sequels. One of them is called the Demetrius and the Gladiator, or the first one is The Robe and then Demetrius and the Gladiator. That's one, just to get the backdrop, because it was happening during their time, right? Then you gotta watch the movie Quo Vadis. That's about Nero, right? You gotta overlook the fact that they got big nose, hook nose Edomites playing Peter, right? Hook nose Edomites playing Paul. You gotta stomach it out. It's just history. Then guess what? Guess what's the best one? You got to go and watch or download the HBO 2-season thing on Rome. The first season had like 12 episodes. The second season had 10, because one of the things that's missing in all of them battles are the Israelites that was helping Julius Caesar defeat Pompey. Brother, they was good. Now listen, and then it's going to tie us up into a lot of things, because what happens is there's certain figures that wrote, like, for how did the Herods example get put over Judea? That goes all the way back to the Maccabee days, when Hyrcanus the first conquered Idumea, and they did not want to leave their land. So he said, well, you guys got to circumcise yourself and follow our laws. This is when white folks became Israel or Jews. Then one of those, yes.
Was that under the Hasmonean Dynasty?
That's the Hasmonean Dynasty. That was Mattathias' father. The reason they call it Hasmonean, because Mattathias' father was named Hasmoneus. So they attributed not to Mattathias, but to his father. His name was Hasmoneus or Asmoneus. And so they call it the Hasmonean Dynasty. You got Judas. Out of all those 5 brothers, Simon was the one who carried on the Maccabean line, right? And so the movie, like I said, those series, you watch those battles, it's good because with interwoven into all of that, in the Josephus is Israel fighting, taking them battles out. So how the Herods got involved was when they got conquered, their father, there's a guy named Antipater, who was John Hyrcanus' servant. John Hyrcanus II. And so he was confirmed as high priest, but the Romans put Antipater, he was in favor of all Jewish affairs between them and the Romans. Antipater had a son whose name was Herod, they call him Herod the Great, and he married Simon, Judas Maccabee's brother. He married Simon's great-great-great-granddaughter, Miriam. And that's where all of the other Herods came from. It's a cold deal, but this is what the Apocrypha and the Josephus primarily gives you. So I would actually like to have a project to where somebody undertakes, as we go into class, some big old whiteboard, or you can do it on a small one so that you can make a sign. And as each generation passes, we start making the family tree to see how the Romans, how the Israelites intersected with the Greeks, the Idumeans, how it happened with the Antiochus, how they all intersect with respect to the Romans. So Israel is like the crossroads for all of those cultures. So when you read about the Seleucid dynasty, they don't tell you about Israel. When you read about the Ptolemaic dynasty, they don't tell you about how it was Israel that was fighting with Pompey Magnus to go, I should say Julius Caesar and Mark Antony took the Jews down and went down and conquered Egypt. They'll just say Egypt became a Roman province in 64 BC, right? They don't tell you how Pompey set up. Pompey made, listen, when Israel, what happened was the wicked Israelites had taken over, and Pompey came and restored order and made sure that the sacrifices went back online. And so when you see how the Most High destroyed Israel by the Romans, you'll understand when you read it was because the Most High was using the Romans to give us that liberty, and Israel was wicked and showed him that they didn't want it. But I was like, damn, it's amazing. But that's what this verse 27 is talking about. But it starts, when it says, it starts at, and he shall confirm the covenant with many. So guess what happens? It all starts with 1 Maccabees chapter 8. Then we end up going to Josephus, the Antiquities, and we start from book 12. Right, we read a bunch of chapters there. We go on to book 13. We go on to book 14. And then once we're done with that, getting the what do you call it? The covenants, then we got to go into book 2, starting, let me say this, the Wars of the Jews, chapter of book 2. And that's where all of actually book 1 too, because book 1 comes and makes a whole lot of reiterations just to keep you on point of what took place with the Antiquities. And then from book 1 of Wars of the Jews to the last chapter of Wars of the Jews, to the last book of Wars of the Jews, that's what verse 27 is talking about. It's the whole, that's what I'm trying to show you. It's the whole Wars of the Jews, but it starts off in Antiquities, book 10 and book 12. It starts off in book 12. It goes on to book 12, book 13. So it's from book 12 of Josephus of Antiquities all the way to the end of Wars of the Jews of Antiquities. That's what verse 27, just verse 27. Shit. So it's a whole lot of reading that you guys will have to undertake on your own. And we come and talk about it. And let me see, you know what this does? It makes you exercise. I'm gonna get this up. Tell them about abstinence. It makes you abstain from shit. Because if you really want it, then you know that what? You ain't that tired. You ain't that tired. Rather be tired in class and then all of a sudden they can go and get a little drink, want to shoot a little pool. Whatever it is, you ain't that damn tired. What happens is you got to let your hunger and your thirst for the word and understanding summons the quickening spirit of the Most High, because that's what he does, He sends you the spirit that gives you that energy, that like the scriptures say, that energize and quicken your spirit. So, and then if you can't do that as a young man, you ain't going to get it as an older man. All of this I got when I was your age. And then I went through intermittent periods. I say intermittent periods, 10 years, 8 years there, where I was just busy in the work, so to speak. When I say the work, meaning what? Having to pull away from the Bible, the daily study like I was doing, and actually what? Take that and put it to use with the men and build it. That's what the Most High used to work on me, hands on, a commitment. Then after so many years, this is the reality of it. Like I'm a Yetazan, our time down in Bay was 10 years of velocity, 10 years of just 18-hour days, classes, but then, and I'm not talking about studying, I'm talking about classes. There's things that Yetazan have, like Yetazan didn't get this. Yetazan got what was required to keep a man fired up and inspired to go and make that daily grind and that sacrifice. That's what he got. This thing now, he's getting this now. He didn't get it then. He got Deuteronomy 28 in London, and he moved here. He got 4 weeks of Spanish, which proved futile for him. And then he got dumped into the workout, and then everything else was about taking this book and carving and sculpting his character. Now he's getting this, and he's 42. So you ain't going to get this if you haven't committed your life. But what did he get? He got the foundation that kept his mind and his spirit quickened and open for this. You know why? Because he committed. And the Most High says, if thou hast gathered nothing in thy youth, this is right, Ecclesiastes like 25, how shalt thou gather anything in thine age? We got this window of opportunity with the Most High. And when we be wanting to pick and choose and not just entirely commit, then you don't get it. You know why? Because the Most High is going to take the rest of your life to give it to you. He don't give it to you when you want it. He's going to see if you're really here. If you have given yourself to him, then in various fields, he'll open up a window. Then you got to be wise and hungry enough to say, damn, I got a little time here. You can't be all into your women. You can't be all into being a family man. You can't be all into being young and running the streets, even if it is with the brothers. That ain't brotherhood. This is brotherhood. Shooting pool ain't brotherhood. This is brotherhood. This is the brotherhood of Christ. You hear that damn cat? Could you let this cat out? He always does this shit. He just pop up and scare the hell out of me out of nowhere. Sound like a damn little demon. Okay, gracias. Just out of nowhere. But anyway, so I say that so as to encourage y'all to once we start, just stick with it, and let's see this through. That's what I want to do. Because guess what I do, man? I go and I take this book, I take the Josephus, and then we'll get a theme, and then we'll interweave. The Spirit interweaves it with the scriptures and the Gospels and it don't just be okay. We're reading history. We be taking how we used to be and find out how we can recapture that. But taking the negative of how we used to be and finding out how can we put that to death. That's what the Josephus is about. It's about giving you more details on why Christ said so much about the Pharisees, and how they got into power. They got into power by a woman who was a godly woman, but let me put it like this, the spirit of her wasn't to be able to discern men. And it was Simon's descendant. Simon had a son, a great-great-grandson named Alexander Janus, who married Salome Alexandra. And Alexandra was a righteous woman, but she's the one who was deceived or beguiled by the acting of the Pharisees. And then it says eventually she ran the government. They ran it, but she got the credit and had to pay all the expense. And they grew to the point where she was just co-signing anybody that they wanted to imprison, they imprisoned. Any thief motherfucker that they wanted to set free, they set free. They was putting niggas to death. When you read Matthew chapter 23, there are certain sections in the Josephus that help you understand why he was railing on them so horribly. They were evil. They were evil. That's all it is to it. So it really helped me to understand. And then you'll find out that these positions, these schools of thought, as Esau likes to put it, They exist to this very day in Israel. That's why Elisha reading and knowing about the Essenes helps. It is good, but it's good in its time. Because if it wasn't for them, listen, when you read what the Essenes were about, then it helps you to understand, oh, that's who that family in 2 Maccabees chapter 7 was. Because that's how it describes them. These were the cats, brother, you couldn't torture. It says they would torture them. They would do anything to get them to eat pork or eat something that they wouldn't eat or to denounce their faith. And brother, they would laugh and mock their tormentors as they was being ripped to pieces. There was a spirit on them, but that spirit on them was due to their life practice. The way they operated evoked the spirit of the Most High, and he was always on them. So it's going to be powerful and amazing to me. I'm done. So, like I said, starting next week, the first step is to read Maccabees chapter. You guys can read it on your own. First Maccabees chapter 8, because we got to start off at where the covenant was established. You can't confirm what doesn't exist. Then from there, we're going to watch the succession of the Maccabean dynasty and how they are interwoven between their fight against the Greek dynasty, the Seleucids, and then their allyship or their amity with the Romans. And it was a two-way street. You Romans didn't just come and help your ass, give you shit. Romans, you had to go to war and fight and help them in their interests. Then they vouch for you and come and enforce your stuff. And that's what it tells you in chapter 8 of First Maccabees, that everybody that was a friend with them the ones that they extended themselves to. And then when you were their friend, they determined who reigned, and whoever they didn't want to reign, they removed them. They did that with us. They were the ones confirming and enforcing who our high priest was. Julius Caesar was. Pompey was, brother. This is the Roman Senate. Mark Antony, not the cantante, not the salsa singer, right? But the OG one, right? These cats are. So it's going to be very interesting and fulfilling. All right. Hey, it's good to see you, Tazapa. Good to see you too, Knuckles. Knuckles Troy, the Knuckles of Troy.
How's that sister doing? How's that sister doing?
Say that. Hey, listen. Hey, Shalom, Korah. Hey, how is the sister? How is Tiara doing, man? Say that again.
She's back. She woke up. She woke up like about 2-3 days ago.
Yeah, I mean, Award told me, but when is she going to be allowed to leave the hospital?
I don't know. She's going through rehabilitation.
Okay. Man, the Most High got his hand on that place, y'all. Okay, y'all do your thing, and I'm Yetazana. We'll see you next Friday, okay?
Yeah. All right.
I'm Yetazana. I'll see you tomorrow, brother.
Yeah. All right. Shalom.
All right, shalom.
Oh.